You're listening to the Music Marketing Manifesto podcast, where you'll learn how you can use direct-to-fan marketing strategies to grow your fan base and generate income from your music with no record label, radio airplay, touring, or press. And I'm your host, John Oszaka. All right, John Oszaka here, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Music Marketing Manifesto podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how I generated over $40,000 in ticket sales recently using approximately $1,800 in Facebook ad spend. There were a couple of other things that went into that, and I'll share all those details, but primarily the driving force behind this campaign was just Facebook and Instagram ads, and I was able to turn a pretty incredible profit. Now, the truth is, I do this all the time as part of my sort of private work as it relates to marketing. But I thought I'd break out one of these recent campaigns that I ran and share the results with you guys. Now, before we get into that, just a little bit of housekeeping. I have been kind of MIA for a little while. If you follow this podcast, if you pay attention to what I do here at Music Marketing Manifesto, I've been pretty quiet for the last 6 months or so. That happens to be relevant to the campaign results that I'm going to share with you today, which I'll get into more in a second. But I've been very, very busy with another project, and I just kind of wanted to let everyone know that I'm done with that project and I'm back. If you've been a member of the Insider Circle or TunePipe, then you've still been interacting with me. I certainly haven't abandoned my post, but I've been very quiet on the podcasting front, on releasing courses, and even really on hitting up the mailing list with new news and information. So all of that is going to change, and I'm back at it, and this podcast kind of kicks that new phase off. So what have I been doing? Why have I been missing in action? And what's up with this $40,000 in ticket sales from around $1,800 in ad spend? So as people that kind of follow me in my private mastermind groups like the Insider Circle probably already know, I've been very involved with theater over the last 6 months, and not only myself, but my entire family got involved in a production over the last 6 months. We staged Little Shop of Horrors here in our little town in Northland, New Zealand, and it took me away for a while. I was the musical director. I was the producer, or one of two producers. I played the voice of Audrey 2 in the show, if you know it. I was the set designer and set builder, and more importantly, at least for your purposes, I was the marketing director. And that campaign was really successful. Not unlike most of the campaigns. One of the things that I brought to the table with my sort of theater company is marketing, and I've marketed the majority of our shows over the last 4 or 5 years, and we actually get really similar results all the time. I've even had better results, truth be told, in the past, but these were results we were very, very happy with. We had sold out the majority of our shows. And as I say, I generated over $40,000 in ticket sales using just approximately $1,800 in ad spend. I will find those screenshots and post them up there, somewhere around there, or maybe it's there, I don't know. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching the video, and if you're not, if you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to audio podcasts, then you'll miss those exact numbers. But they are there in the video version of this podcast, so you can see that everything is legit. So, what am I talking about? And how parallel is this to selling music tickets or tickets to music shows? I've used this exact same strategy selling tickets to tours with similar success, selling many thousands of dollars worth of tickets on just hundreds of dollars in ad spend, selling out shows. I did a tour, it's a little while ago now, a couple of years ago, where I was put in charge of the online marketing, and I think it was just 5 shows. I believe we sold out 3 of those shows using these techniques, and I want to say the budget was about $500 for that campaign. I've shared these strategies inside of the Insider Circle. If you're a member of my private mastermind group called the Insider Circle, then you will have seen some training on this in the past. This podcast episode is going to have a lot of overlap with that, but there are some new things because every time we run a campaign, we tweak things, we change things. and we get different results. So if you've gone through that training, or you're a member of the Insider Circle, there is going to be some new stuff in this for you. If you're not and you'd like to find out more about that, go to musicmarketingmanifesto.com, click on products and services, and you can find a link to the Insider Circle registration page. All right, so back to the question: how much overlap exists here between selling tickets to, say, in my case, a musical, versus selling tickets to your shows? Really, this particular strategy works best when you're in a smaller town. If you're in a city of millions of people, it's going to be hard to create that tipping point. I live in a fairly small town where, last I looked, the population was only around 10,000. It's about 20,000 when you count, 15 miles of surrounding area. When I target my audience on Facebook using a 15-mile radius, I get about 20 to 22,000 people usually in my target audience. So again, that's kind of going out into some pretty far-flung areas. 15 miles doesn't sound like a lot, but it kind of is in this region. We're dealing with completely different towns and locations. But that's my targetable pool. Obviously there'd be youth that I'm not targeting. Usually it depends on the show. If it's straight music, I'm going 18 and up. Sometimes if it's theater, in my case, I might be going 23 and up. Just don't find the interest is very high with the lower audiences. Truth be told, these days you don't really need to set an age parameter. Facebook's going to do a really good job of isolating that for you. Everything is so, their AI is so responsible for your targeting these days. Quite often, if you add too many targeting variables, you can actually hurt things. There are a lot of exceptions there. The reason I do set that parameter is that I do find that what I'm doing, the ads and even these events, do appeal, at least online, to the younger demographic, but they don't buy tickets. So I do kind of go out of my way to exclude that audience. So again, just to summarize, this strategy works best if you are focusing on a smaller town, and that's really important. This doesn't mean you can't sell tickets in a larger town, but this particular strategy is for those of you who are trying to sell tickets in a smaller town. So what do you do if you live in a larger town? Well, perhaps when you book your next tour, you can use this approach, or perhaps you have some secondary markets that you regularly perform in. If you live in Los Angeles, perhaps you head down to Oceanside every now and then and perform, or Riverside, or any of the surrounding areas that have smaller populations that are, I don't know, a little more tight-knit of a community. That's a big part of what we're trying to do. I guess kind of skipping ahead there and getting to the end here, the real fundamental goal, what I'm trying to do with this strategy is to try and really just demonstrate to the town or community, the target audience, that my event is the event to go to for this particular weekend or week, or whatever it is you're doing, or night. If you can do that, then you will succeed. And in smaller communities, people are usually pretty hungry for quality entertainment, and there isn't a lot to do. And so as long as you can kind of create that tipping point of awareness where everybody has been saturated with impressions of your event. I'm usually spreading this out over approximately 2 months. When I've done music tours, it's been a tighter knit, a smaller run, about 30 days. That's not so much by design as much as it has been the circumstances. Music tends to kind of come together a little more last minute, whereas theater is many months out of planning. So I'd probably take 6 weeks for a tour or a music event if I had it, but you could pull it off with less time. And I've done this actually with multiple music events. I'm remembering beyond the tour, I've done single one-off shows for myself. I do the marketing for various musical venues around here and use sort of similar strategies. So I actually do have, as I think about it, quite a few instances of using this for straight music events. I just the campaign that I'm sharing with you today is specifically around theater, and it works really, really well. But getting back on track, if we can create that tipping point of awareness where not only have people seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, instances of your ad popping up in front of them, especially when you can combine that with advertising on the street, maybe a few Corflute sort of billboards or, posters in shops. If you can create that saturation, not only will you, again, create that tipping point of multiple impressions where a person is not just sort of peripherally aware of your event, but overwhelmingly aware of it because they've seen so many impressions of it. They're seeing it as they drive down the street. They're seeing it when they're shopping in the store, and they're constantly being hit up on Facebook and Instagram or partner sites with your logos and advertising and different hooks, different reasons to buy, which is something that we'll get into momentarily. If you can do that, you'll also start to create a tipping point around word of mouth where it actually, you create so much awareness that it starts to get reinforced within the community itself, where people are talking about it when they're bumping into their friends. Hey, are you going to this thing? And that's when it really starts to catch on fire. And when you've done that, and again, this is why I like to have 6 weeks, 2 months, when you've done that and you've created that much awareness, you quite often can see many hundreds, if not thousands, of people coming out. In this current example, where we sold over 40,000 in ticket sales, it was, what was the number of tickets? Approximately 1,600. Some of those were discounted school tickets. We did sort of a special school show where we approached the schools directly, so not necessarily a byproduct of direct marketing, but it was over 1,200 tickets at approximately, I'd say, an average head price, because seniors and students were cheaper, but an average ticket price of around $36, something like that. That's New Zealand dollars. And that adds up to quite a lot of revenue. And that number in ad spend of $1,800 is actually quite high from what I'm used to. That's the most I've ever spent on one of these campaigns. That's actually not true. I'm in the middle of one right now. We're going to go just over it by a couple of $100. It's a new campaign. It's for a client, so I'll kind of not talk about that one. But I'm doing the marketing for another series of events, music and dance and some theater as well. It's more of a festival, and we're doing really, really well with a little bit more in ad spend. But normally, or historically, I'm spending around $1,000. You get into an issue around ad spend when you're in these smaller towns where you kind of can't spend more. You can't spend any more, or you get diminishing returns. For example, let's say I'm spending $20 a day on an audience of around 20,000 people, and I'm getting engagements or clicks. And again, I'll get into that later because I do both. But let's say I'm spending, I'm getting $20 engagements on my $20 a day ad spend, and this is working really well, and I'm selling tickets every day. Why wouldn't I want to scale up? Because, more money out means more money in. So let's go and spend $40 a day. Well, quite often what will happen when you do that is you'll go from that 20 cents per conversion to 40 cents per conversion. You'll just drop off a cliff, and all you'll be doing is spending more, and you won't be getting anything more significant or anything very significant in your results. There is usually a bump, but I might see a 20% bump in the amount of traffic I'm getting, but not the 100% bump that you'd ultimately be hoping if you increased your budget by 100%. So there is kind of a line that you can't cross, and historically I've sort of felt that number was about $1 per 1,000 people in your targetable audience. Now, with this recent campaign, the Little Shop of Horrors campaign, and even the current campaign that I'm working on, I've been able to push through that by splitting up my objectives. So I'm not running one campaign per day, I suppose, per hook. I'm running two. One is for engagement and one is for clicks. So let's talk about that a little bit there. Historically, what has worked really well for me was just engagement. And I know that this flies in the face of what a lot of people would expect. You want people to click on that ticketing link and buy your ticket. So, traffic is going to be or better yet, conversions, although conversions can be a little bit difficult depending on the daily sales volume. If you're not getting 5 to 10 conversions per day, then the algorithm's not going to get enough information to do what it needs to do, and you're not going to see the results that you want with your ad campaigns. So if you're not selling, at least, again, 5 to 10, more is better, but at least 5 to 10 tickets a day. Again, in this example, we're talking about a ticketing campaign, but this applies to any kind of campaign. If you're not seeing 5 to 10 results per day based on your objective, then the algorithm is not going to have enough information. It's not going to be able to dial in, and you're going to get poor results with your campaign. So to that end, and because quite often we're dealing with third-party ticketing sites, which was the case with our show, we're selling through a company called iTicket, which was kind of a requirement per the venue. And as such, I couldn't optimize for sales. And there's other stuff that happens because we are creating so many impressions. We're creating impressions on the street with our posters and everything. And we're creating multiple impressions that are resulting in conversions down the line. Not every conversion is also getting recorded by the conversion tracking. And so that works against us even further. So to that end, I often use engagement, or historically I've just used engagement. Occasionally, as I get closer to the event, once the awareness level is higher, switching to traffic. And there is some magic in going with that objective, going with engagement, because remember, my real goal with this campaign is to just create so much awareness in my small town that there is a tipping point and everyone is convinced that this is the thing to do on this particular day, or on this particular week, or on this particular weekend. And engagement has proven to be the best objective to go with, because, it creates that social proof at the same time of creating the awareness that I'm ultimately after. It's creating social proof where, again, it's a small community and you're seeing your friends engaging with a particular post, commenting on it and liking it. And that piques one's interest all in and of itself. That was the word I was looking for. So engagement works really well, but I don't know if it's perhaps just changes with Facebook's algorithm and targeting, and there have been a lot of changes recently, or I've stumbled on something that just works a little bit better. What I was noticing in this particular campaign is that we had a little bit of a slow pocket in sales, and it got me into a little bit of a panic. I hadn't seen it before. I think part of the reason was that in this particular campaign, we used an early bird discount. And so I think what happened is all of our really keen sort of supporters came in extremely early. And the people that were going to come in due to the impact of the marketing, they don't normally come in until a bit later. And so we sort of hit this lull in the middle that felt like unprecedented slowness, and got me very worried that there wasn't demand for the product. But in reality, I just think that middle section of buyers that would have normally come in came in very early, and so we had a lull. But that prompted me to try a different strategy, which was to get away from engagement and start using clicks or traffic. And they were just landing page views that I was using, and I was not driving people directly to the ticketing site because I didn't have as much control over the way, the optimization of the page itself. Those sales pages, by the way, really matter when you can control the brand, you can control the character size, you can control the ease of reading and consumption and getting that information across. In my experimenting, seems to really help. When I send people to a ticketing site that is laid out poorly with small fonts and you got to click various tabs to get the information you want, I don't see the conversions that I ultimately want to see. When I send them to my sales page and then just have a buy tickets now button that links away to that page after they've already gone through all of the information that I need them to see, then it seems to work best. So I was using landing page views and I was using engagement, and I was able to double my budget without any noticeable decrease in results. In fact, I was, of course, seeing an increase in results. So that was resulting in each ad having a lot of engagement, but I was also getting a significant amount of traffic going over to the ticketing site as well. And to clarify, when I create an ad for a campaign like this, I am changing the ad up so frequently, usually every 2 to 3 days, that I don't even bother split testing the ads. You could do that. I've been doing this a long time. I have a good feel for what's going to work. I have a limited amount of creative, and in terms of the assets, the images and videos that I'm going to ultimately use in the campaign. And so I am not going to bother. I don't bother with the split testing of the ads. By the time I'm landing on any kind of results, I'm already moving on to the next ad. So I put my best foot forward, I put on my copywriter's hat, and I create a solid ad, and I trust in that process. And I will break down that process here in a bit. But what I do is I go to my Facebook page, or you can go into the Business Suite and schedule so that it posts to Instagram and Facebook at the same time. I don't really know why. I guess it's just habit. I tend not to do that. I tend to go right to my Facebook page, post something right there on the page, and then I tend to go to Instagram and manually post it, and then I go into my ads manager and I set up the ads. I never use the boost, the simple Facebook boost. I'm always using the ads manager because I have a lot more control in there, and I'm setting up 2 ads. Once I've set up an ad, I'm just hitting duplicate and then basically changing out the post. But if it was the first time I was creating it, I'd go in, I'd set up an ad, I'd choose my objective, which is, again, I'm going to do 2 of them. One is engagement, one is landing page views. And I am going to target everyone, for the most part, within an area. No special interest targeting. I'm not adding people that like just theater. I'm going for everyone and relying on the Advantage Plus targeting and just Facebook's AI in general, or Meta's AI, to do the targeting. I don't almost never select an Instagram post as the post source. I've tried switching them up where I'll create just a Facebook ad for Facebook, for the Facebook audience, and just an Instagram ad for the Instagram audiences. But for me, the Instagram ads are just too expensive that way. I just don't get any real, I don't get the return that I'm ultimately after. So I go into Meta, I select both Facebook and Instagram placements. I go, for me, about 15 miles out of my location. Sometimes I go as far as to just drop a pin on the location, or I'll just enter the township. I'll look at the map, make sure it's got everything I want covered in it, in that targeting region. And then I'll set up the ad for engagement. And again, I'm selecting the post. When possible, I will always use a learn more call to action button that takes people to the landing page, and I'll use 2 links in the post itself. So in the copy that I add to the post, I'm almost always using 2 links, unless it's a break from my normal process and I'm just using a sort of short copy, which I sometimes do around, holidays, special events, these kinds of things, where it's on the fly kind of post. And again, I'll break down the creative here in a bit. But I am setting up that post, selecting the organic post that I just put on Facebook as my medium and as my creative. And then I am running an engagement ad, wanting as many engagements as I can have to my entire target region. The only targeting I sometimes add is an age minimum. And again, that's just because in my case, I'm just not seeing the younger audiences buying tickets to things. There are some events, especially that I do for clients, where there are no ticket prices on it, and I do go all ages. And then I do the same thing, but I'll add the addition of traffic. Now, again, that brings my budget in my area to about $40 a day, which is where my sort of ceiling is. If you didn't have that much money to spend, because over the course of, a month, that's $1,200 approximately. And not everyone's necessarily going to have that. But remember, I'm generating tens of thousands of dollars in sales. So that's never been a loss for me. That's always, I want to spend more money, not less money. And that's something that's really important for people to wrap their heads around. I see people time and time again skimping on the most important thing that you can spend money on, which is that marketing. I get people when I'm working with clients that are really resistant to increasing their budget, and I never understand why. Like an extra $5 might get you an extra $40. Why are you not doing that? And I don't think I've ever not seen an increase in results when the budget goes up. There's always a spike on the graph chart. So, but, if we don't have the money in our bank, we can't afford to risk it, then we can't afford to risk it, in which case you would just bring down that budget. But what you need to make sure you're doing is keeping your budget at that point where you are at least getting your 5 to 10. Again, 10's a lot better. More than that is even better, but 5 to 10 actions per day based on your objective. So if your objective is engagement, then you need to make sure you're getting like 10 engagements a day. If your objective is traffic or landing page views, you need to make sure that you're getting 10 landing page views a day. And you should have no problem doing that with a smaller budget if engagement is your objective. And this is another reason why engagement has always worked for me, because sometimes my budget might be $500. And if that's spread out over 2 months, that's not a huge amount of money. And if I was going after landing page views, I might not be able to hit those 10 per day. So there is a balancing act there that you need to be aware of. In my case, again, kind of just running down this case study for you guys, I was spending $40 a day, 20 on each objective, and it seemed to work really well. It was a nice way of pushing through that $20 a day ceiling that I seem to experience and getting the best of both worlds. I was creating that groundswell of awareness within the community that was going to come in handy later as the event got very close, and it really, really did, as we saw run to sell out shows right at the end, because everyone knew it was coming and was aware of it by then, especially once the first show happened and the rumors of quality were getting out. But I was also driving that traffic directly to, I keep saying ticketing page, not directly to the ticketing page, to my landing page, which then linked to the ticket page. And so I was getting a healthy number of those people that also perhaps wanted to buy. Because if you set your objective to just engagement and then you monitor the cost per actual click, it's considerably more. You're getting a lot less clicks, of course, when your objective is engagement. And there is an argument to be said that perhaps they could be higher quality clicks. But we do need traffic on that landing page, on that sales page, on that ticketing page, or we're not going to get anywhere. So it was a nice balance of the two that seems to really work. Now, again, if you are in a larger city, if you're getting into the hundreds of thousands of people in your targetable audience, some of these things are going to break down. There's more risk of getting more bot exposure. You tend to avoid most of that when you're dealing with a small target audience. And so try it if you're in a bigger city. I have marketed festivals in larger cities with success, just not as much success. And what I cannot do in a large city is create that tipping point. Even if I put constraints on the ads to limit the audience size, if there's 2 million people in your city, that person who sees your ad is never going to go down to the coffee shop and bump into their friends and have that conversation. Oh, are you going to this thing? That's not going to happen. So you're always missing that groundswell of awareness. There's a lot you can do to sell tickets in bigger markets. If that was my goal, I would be focusing more on building the audience one by one, building the mailing list, going back to some of the techniques I teach in Music Marketing Manifesto with my deep sale funnels, and then trying to leverage the relationship that I create with that list, that subscriber, that individual, and get them to come to a show. But I might just set some geo-targeting parameters around that ad campaign so that I'm building a list within a small region, so I know I can also leverage that audience to get them to come to shows. So once more, this is a strategy that works well for people in smaller towns. And again, you don't have to live in that town. It kind of helpful because you get that sort of awareness as the ads are popping up and people are seeing you and your bandmates and they're going, oh, I know this person, or I've seen this person around. But I've definitely had success doing it when I didn't live in the town. So it can be part of a tour or an event that you're holding outside of the town, but you want to make sure that you're dealing with a small concentrated community so you can create that tipping point. Now, another really valuable bit of advice that I can give you, especially to musicians, is that in order for this to, I shouldn't say in order for it to work, but one of the ways that this works really well is to create an event around this, to allow people to lock into something that they already connect with as a fan. If you're an independent artist and they don't know you, they being the people in your target audience, the people seeing your ad, if they don't know you, and it's, in my case, John Oszajca performing in some town, and they don't know who John Oszajca is, then it's really hard for me to trigger that interest, to get them interested. It's just some guy. And I have to do a lot more work with constant ads and constant telling of the story, which you can do and which we do regardless to an extent, which, again, I'll get into when we talk about the creative. But it's a lot more work, and you're going to have a much harder time. Instead, you can take the exact same show, the exact same artist, and create a theme, an event around the very same show. So, for example, I'm an Americana kind of artist. Instead of John Oszajca, it might become an evening of Americana music, or you might even give the concept a name and almost like a mini festival, and push that. Because when you're doing that, if it's an evening of Americana music, and, perhaps ideally you get another artist or two on that bill that make the same kind of music, now you're tapping into a pre-existing love, a pre-existing passion and interest, which is a segment of the target audience's existing love for Americana music. So when they see that ad, when they see those hooks come up, they instantly can think to themselves, I love that. This sounds interesting. If you're a blues musician, same thing. If they don't know you, you're just some guy. And then they have to dig to find out that you make blues music. If it's an evening of blues music at the something venue, such and such venue, then there's something there for them to instantly tap into. That's one of the reasons I think it works so well with theater, for example, is that when a show comes across, especially a licensed show that they've heard of, you're tapping into some pre-existing love. In the case of Little Shop of Horrors, they've all seen the movie. Many have seen the show, and our hope was certainly that many people go, I love that show, and needless to say, many people did, and they came out. And with music, again, that's not necessarily the case, or much less commonly it's the case. So creating an identity around your event that is bigger than just you will really help you to tap into that pre-existing interest and passion. That's what as an aside, that's what we're trying to do with all of our marketing around music. And that's kind of the secret sauce to what I teach in Music Marketing Manifesto in my programs, and as a copywriter, as someone who is a certified copywriter and teaches copywriting to musicians. That's what we're trying to do. We are trying to tap into pre-existing interests and passions. And again, this is part of that aside. When I'm selling music through a funnel, through a deep sale funnel, which is what I call the sort of MMM style funnel that I've been teaching and modifying and building upon for more than a decade now, what we're trying to do is tap into, we're using copywriting techniques and images, occasionally video, to tap into a pre-existing interest and passion and align our product and our brand with their interests. And if we do that well, we get this instant reaction where someone kind of almost does a virtual double take, because the messaging we put in front of them completely aligns with how they already feel, with the conversation already taking place in their mind. And if we do that, then we'll start a relationship. We'll start a process where a person has to say yes or no. Do I want to take the next step or not? And more often than not, well, actually, it's not more often than not. It's around 35 to 35 to 45% of the time, they will say, yeah, sure, I'll take the next step. And then, somewhere between 5 and 10% of those people will hopefully ultimately buy, at least if the funnel's well put together and your music is good and your brand is good and you're good, halfway decent at communicating. But again, I digress. So getting back on track, let's kind of just do a little bit of recap to take all this stuff and kind of put it back in line. When I am using the local event promo strategy that I've been laying out in front of you, what I'm doing is starting usually about 6 weeks to 2 weeks out. If it's music, I'm trying to create a overarching concept or identity to what I'm selling. It doesn't have to be a festival with a name, but even just calling it an evening of Americana music and pushing that angle, that hook, as opposed to just your own name, can really work well with this particular approach. I am targeting small towns. I don't have a precise number. I'd say something under 50,000. I've not used this. Well, I have used it in bigger towns, but I've run into resistance anytime the audience was sort of over that. But the truth is, I kind of seem to be under 50,000, or I'm right into the millions. I haven't had a lot of experience in the 200,000 range. So, there's a little bit of instinct in here rather than any hard facts. But I'd say try to keep that. This is a strategy that's best used when you're dealing with a town or community that's under 50,000. The smaller, the better. It's quite funny, actually, when I went on tour and used this approach. We went into Auckland. Again, I'm in New Zealand. We went into Auckland, where it's a huge city with 1.5 million people. A 1.5 million population. And we went to a fantastic venue, one of the sort of premier venues for singer-songwriters. And we know a lot of people, we being the collective. There were a number of us on the bill. And I think we sold like 90 tickets, which wasn't so bad. But then we went just, 45 minutes up the road to a tiny little town that had something like 6,000 people in it. And we sold out. And it wasn't a huge number, maybe 100, 130, something like that. But we did better in that tiny little town where we didn't know anyone than we did in the huge city where theoretically we should have been able to get on the phone and get more people to show up. But it just goes to show how effective this can be in a small market versus a large market where you can create the tipping point, or you can't create it in that large city. So getting back on track, we're starting 5 or 6 weeks out. We're creating a brand or identity that's a little bit larger than ourselves. We're targeting an audience of under 50,000 people, going completely broad. We're not limiting that, with the exception of possibly limiting the age range, depending on who your target audience is. And we are creating ads on our Facebook, or posts on our Facebook and Instagram pages, and we're using those as the ads. Our objectives are, at a minimum, engagement. Ideally, we're splitting that into 2 identical ads, one for engagement and one for landing page views. And we're driving people to our own landing page where we are either selling tickets or then linking away via an order button to a ticketing site if you're using a third-party service. Now, let's talk about the creative. So what are we actually using as our ads, and what does that look like? What I do going into almost every campaign, at least like this, is I start by making a list of hooks. What are the different hooks? What's a hook? I think that's probably self-explanatory, but a hook is basically a reason someone should care. If it's, I'll stick with my example with Little Shop of Horrors. It was a hit film. It's one of the longest running off-Broadway shows in history. It's a Broadway show. It has well-known writers. We had a local talent. We had some notable local talent involved. So each group, my recording history as one of the cast members, Interscope and Warner Brothers, that was a hook. One of the other, the lead who played Seymour, he had a lot of chart success in New Zealand, so that was a hook. We had 3 girls playing the Ronettes that were Kapahaka finalists here in New Zealand. That was a hook. All of these different hooks became an item on my list that I was going to potentially go to with this campaign. So I come up with as many hooks as I can, and things that people would really care about, things that people would find interesting. It's a great date night. The early bird tickets, time sensitivity. As you get closer, tickets are running out. If you sell out, that becomes a hook. One show is sold out. But there are still tickets left. Every potential hook, I'm making a list of, I don't, when I say as many as I can, it's not 200, but it's usually around 10 to 20. And, I'll pull out the ones that don't seem as striking. And then I am creating an ad for every single one of those hooks, and I am changing it up every 2 to 3 days. If something's performing particularly well, I will let it run longer. We'll usually go after some publicity, and if I get a story in a paper, that becomes a hook. I'll link away to the newspaper's website, if possible, if it's not behind a paywall. Sometimes it is. And I'll try to leverage their authority, and that has worked really well for me. And even if there's not a ticketing link, again, it's a small community. People are going to see the ad multiple times. On a recent campaign I ran using the strategy, I had something like 400,000 impressions in a town of 20,000 people. With that campaign, again, as an aside, I did something in addition to that, as I ran a low budget awareness campaign, just trying to get as many impressions as possible for the main logo, just for a few weeks during the peak of things, to just make sure that everyone was seeing it. So that helped get those numbers up, but it's usually over 100,000 impressions, at least in the high tens of thousands of impressions by the end of one of these campaigns. So people are seeing these ads many, many times. And to do that, you really do need to change it up every few days, or your performance just starts to drop. So again, I'm kind of making an order, all the different hooks that I think will work well, and how many hooks I have is kind of, I take the number of days that I have between now and the show. So if it's 30 days, and I'm going to change things out, let's say every 3 days, then I've got room for 10 hooks. If it's 2 months, I've got room for 20 hooks. And, again, I may let an ad run a little bit longer, so I may end up pulling some of those hooks out, but you want to make sure that you've thought it through and you've got enough things to talk about. What might those hooks look like for music? So again, going back to my evening of Americana music, each artist has a story, so each artist is a hook. Americana music is a hook. Again, I like to do things like on the personal level, like Date Night was a hook. And that tour that I'm referencing, it was all culminating on the 4th of July, not a holiday here in New Zealand, but it aligned with our Americana theme. Come and celebrate the Americana, or the 4th of July with our Americana Music Festival, and people could kind of get into it. There was food brought to the venue, and it was American style food. That was a hook. And the restaurant that made it, that was a hook. So each one of the value adds to this event becomes a hook. And as far as, well, actually, I'll stick on the copy. And the formula that I use with the copy is pretty consistent. I go hook, call to action, link, back up and tell a few paragraphs about the, more details, basically, about what you're ultimately offering about that hook and the broader selling proposition of the event, and then a final call to action, and usually a whimsical sign-off. So just to help you visualize that, what do I mean? Again, let's say the hook was an evening of Americana. I would just jump right into that. Join us for an evening of Americana music at the Turner Center on this date. So all the key details right there. I use special characters like all caps on the venue name and the event name or the artist name. I do use some emojis. I try not to overdo it, but occasionally I use an emoji to just make it pop. Maybe something in the beginning. If I have bullets, I'll use them as the bullets instead of an actual bullet. And that's the formula. And then when I say back up and tell the story, so again, an evening of Americana music, or join us for an evening of Americana music featuring such and such and such and such at this venue on this date. Here's the link. Really quick, short, as tight as I can get it, because I don't want people to have to click read more or scroll in order to get that main hook. Then I back up and say, 3 amazing artists have come together, to bring us an evening of Americana music. And then I talk about this artist and that artist and this, all the details, really just the complete summary of things. I imagine it like, to To use an analogy that I've used in some of my Insider Circle conversations, when I was a lot younger, way back in the day when I lived in Seattle, in the late '90s, I worked at one of those produce stands that are so famous at Pike Place Market, and your boss would always crack the whip and have you call out to strangers to try to pull them in. So I'm using a hook to do that. Strawberries, 2 packs for two for the price of one, or whatever that hook of the day might have been. And their heads turn, they come in, and now I start a conversation, and I just be sort of real with them. Hey, so you looking for strawberries? Yeah, these are great, they're organic, or whatever the details were. And I just kind of talk to them. I use the same formula in the ads. Throw out that hook, get them to turn their heads, get that attention, figuratively speaking. I pull them in, and now I've bought myself a second, and I explain, and I give them all the details. And then if they're still reading, I need to have that call to action and that link at the end of the post. Don't want them to have to look around at all. I want it to be right there in front of them, and they click, and just a nice cute sign off. Hope you see you at the show or whatever. And that's the formula. And I use that formula over and over and over again. All that's really changing is that hook, and sometimes I'm changing up the language. Occasionally, I want to vary things up a little bit more, where I've got, it might just be a short post. Hey, it's Valentine's Day. Don't miss out on, or it's Valentine's Day. Are you short on gift ideas? Grab a ticket to this, and then a short link, just some kind of quick little thing to vary it up. I sometimes like to have those quick blast short posts in there, and I tend to do that for the ones with shorter runs. But for the most part, it's that formula I mentioned: hook, call to action, explanation, call to action, sign off. And as far as creative, I'm a big proponent of images. Now, I know most of the industry is there to tell you that you have to use video. And video certainly is valuable and certainly has its place. And I do use video sometimes. But it depends on what you're selling. A lot of the advice that is out there, and this is kind of important, and this extends way beyond what we're talking about here today. But a lot of the advice that is out there, that musicians are following, comes from people that are learning in the internet marketing space. And the selling proposition for traditional products is completely different than the selling proposition for music, especially independent music. So what works for all the marketing gurus isn't necessarily the best approach for musicians. And an example of what I mean there is that I have usually 9 times out of 10 better luck with images. And that's because I'm selling something that doesn't scratch an actual itch. It doesn't solve a real world problem for the most part. I know you can stretch the definition of problem to say, sure, it does, but it doesn't. And but what we're doing with music is that we're selling a promise. We're tapping into, again, that pre-existing interest and passion. And to that end, the promise is often a lot more alluring than the reality. But if we can pull them in on the promise and get them onto our list, or get them to take that first step, now we bought ourselves a little bit of time, and we can overcome a few of those, less immediate, less reactive kind of realities, and win them over with our personality. We win them over with our bigger, broader story. And so to that end, I have just a lot more success with images. Now, if you're just using an image and you have terrible copy, this is buy my album or buy tickets now, that's not going to work. But if you have a well-structured copy, hammering a hook that is already of interest to that person deep down, and you're creating awareness in a small town, so to the point where they're seeing multiple impressions, the image doesn't usually, it has to be an attractive image, but it's far easier to create a compelling image that won't detract from the allure of the promise. When we use video, it often, frankly, just looks amateurish and hacky, and it doesn't align with the mystique of the promise of the rock star, of the special evening. In the case of theater can look really terrible when it's filmed. And not our show. Our show is awesome, but it's hard to capture high quality video that is compelling because it just shines all the lights. You see all the warts, you see all the reality, and sometimes that reality, even when it's good, doesn't align with again, the promise. Now, if you do have great video, maybe a really good looking music video that is compelling, or just some really honest and sincere talking head footage, it can work. And I do use it. I use 2 videos in the Little Shop of Horrors campaign. One was a minute long sort of little documentary about the making of the show, shot by someone named Harley Alexander, who did it actually for council, with whom we got some funding for this show. So he was doing it for his own reasons, but it was really great. It was really compelling. Captured everything in a really wonderful light, and so I used it, and it really worked well to sort of win some hearts. I also used a very simple video that I made with AI, which was to take the plant that was in our poster and animate. I threw an extra syllable in there. Animate it so it came to life, and it just was the plant that you all know from Little Shop of Horrors, looking around and grinning with all its teeth. And I had some text popping up and some music behind it, and it looked very slick and pro. And I wasn't revealing too much, but what I was trying to do was the slickness itself communicated that we were a professional show, or at least that was the goal, and I think it worked. So don't be afraid to use video. Just make sure you don't burst the bubble of what it is that you're ultimately selling. So once more, to that end, I tend to take a series of images that tell the story of what I'm ultimately selling, and also broadcast the core value of the hook. So, with theater, it would be different than music. With theater, I'm doing a photo shoot with the actors as characters, and I'm making them look really beautiful, and trying to leverage the fact that people are going like, oh, I love that character, or I know that person, and getting that engagement, getting that interest, showing people that what we've put together looks so pro that the show must be even better. With music, it's similar. I'm taking, shots of the different artists. I'm taking the logo of the event. I am, when relevant, using video, music videos, things like that, and just coming up with an image that supports the hook, but also reinforces the brand. You need some consistency, a consistency of look, a consistency of logo, text, colors, so that when the next image pops up, a total stranger, well, not a total stranger, someone who had seen, that maybe doesn't know you, but had seen the previous ad, kind of instantly knows that this new image that they're seeing is related to the previous ad that they saw. For example, working on a festival right now where there's many different artists, but they've created a nice frame and a certain font style that has a sort of L shape to it, that lays on top, and they use different color frames. But every time you see one of those colored frames pop up with an image in it, once you've seen the second or the third one, you know that this is part of this particular festival. And so you can do things like that. Just something to artistically tie it together and really reinforce that brand. Again, we can do that with logos, colors, fonts, framing, and you're going to need to have at least an image or video for each one of those posts that communicates the exact hook that your ad copy communicates. And in addition to the online creative, it is helpful when you can have creative on the streets. You get that 1-2 punch thing happening when they're seeing it online and they're seeing it offline. So in the case of this particular show, we spent around $1,000 on, we call them billboards, but they're just those sort of, I don't know if it's technically plastic. They feel like cardboard, but I think it's technically plastic core flutes. They're weather resistant. The biggest ones we get are, and we only get a couple of the big ones. They're, 1.2 meters by 2.4 meters, so like the size of a sheet of plywood, and we put a couple at key places, and then we get a lot of much smaller ones, and we usually have around a dozen of those. They're like 1.2 meters by 0.8 meters, and we put them around town. We make some posters, a few $100s worth of just A4 sort of, normal printing paper size posters, and put those in store windows. And then we do the little handbills that we can all hand out when we're out socializing. When I say we all, I mean, in this case, the cast, but in your case, your band members or you yourself. You don't want to overdo it because you don't want to spend hundreds of dollars on stuff that sits around and doesn't ultimately get used. But if you can use it and you can get it up, then that will help. And then the third punch in this kind of marketing triangle is publicity. It's usually not hard to do in a small town. If you've created an event, I usually actually start the marketing before even reaching out. Once you've done it once or twice, you get to know the people, and it's not hard to go back to them over and over again because there's an understanding of the quality of your output. If you've had one success already, then they know this is probably going to be successful again, and so they'll come on board. But if you're just starting out, it might help to, and you've never approached media before, it might help to start that story online, so they themselves, the editors and journalists, are seeing the marketing go up, and they themselves are wondering what this coming event is. And then you put together a little press release. It's not hard to do if you don't know how to do it these days. Something like ChatGPT can really help you. Just use your phone, use the app, and just talk into it and tell ChatGPT all about what you're doing and say, can you please formulate a press release and format a press release based on that? And you'll get something pretty darn good. And you get your images together that they can use in any write-up that they do. And that 1, 2, 3 punch, that sort of trifecta of online, offline, and publicity works really, really powerfully together, again, especially in a small town. And that's really kind of it. One other little kind of secret sauce tip that I use is if you plan on doing this more than once, I tend to take a victory lap with the advertising. So when the event is over, I'll email the ticket holders and ask them to, leave reviews. I don't really use the review sites anymore. I used to do it with Facebook reviews, and sometimes even, depending, again, theater's a little different than music, but Google business reviews. I don't do that. I create a dedicated thank you post when the event is over, where I basically thank the community in a really sincere and meaningful way, getting a little sentimental and emotional for thanking them for their support and asking them to let us know what they thought of the event. Then I'll email the ticket holders, the people that bought, provided you have access to that data, which you should be able to work out, depending on, if you're taking tickets yourself or using a third party. Most third parties will have some option to pass that information. And you email the people that did buy, and you thank them, and you say, hey, we've created a special post on Facebook to thank our audiences and where people can tell us what they thought. Would you let us know what you thought? It really helps us for the future. And then you can collect testimonials, essentially, that you can use in the future because they're public, but also everyone just kind of sees everybody else doing it, and it really reinforces that brand. And if you're sincere and genuine in your thanks to the community, they'll hear that and they'll appreciate that. Not a lot of people tend to take that time to say thank you when it's over. It's all bullshit, and everyone just wants you to give to them. But when you give a little bit back, people notice it, in my opinion. It helps to set you up for the next time where, it's like it's like somebody coming to your house and leaving without saying goodbye. It sort of feels like that when we're begging people to buy tickets to our show, and then it's just over and they don't hear anything ever again. I think those thank yous at the end are important. And again, it's also a nice opportunity to do a little preemptive marketing for the next show by asking for that feedback and collecting it in one place, creating a reinforcement of social proof right there and then on that post. And And there's something, marketers talk about this a lot. There's something about making people jump through hoops, making people do a little bit of work. It causes them to get invested. When that person leaves a comment saying, I came to the show last night, it was amazing, they have invested a little bit of time and mental energy into you. And that creates a little bit of mass, a little bit, a little neural cluster somewhere in their mind that is going to be valuable to you down the line. The next time you head out and do your marketing, you're not just going to be an artist they once saw and have now forgotten about, but you're going to be an artist that they saw, had a meaningful experience with, and then what's the word that I'm looking for? Figuratively speaking, chiseled that experience in stone for the world to read through that simple little social media comment. So that tends to work as well. So that's it. That's my local event promo strategy. Again, I've used this now probably around a dozen times on major campaigns, generating anywhere from probably 15,000 to 70,000, or maybe it's not. Maybe I haven't quite hit 70, maybe 60 something in sales for myself, for clients. It works really, really well. That formula, once more, as just a quick recap, is create an event in a small town, give it an identity that is bigger than just you, that aligns with a pre-existing interest or passion that your target audience might have. Create a list of hooks, create organic posts every two to 3 days around those hooks, using mostly images, but video if you've got compelling video that supports the hooks and supports the brand and supports the key selling proposition behind the promise of your event. Use Facebook and Instagram ads to promote that organic content, using both engagement and, if possible, landing page views as the objectives, splitting your budget between the two, or if you're really limited, you can just go with engagement. Start 6 to 8 weeks early, and push again a new hook every few days, and when it's all over, thank those that came out to support you and set yourself up for the next time. That's it. That has worked really, really well for me, and I hope that it can help some of you. Now, if you want to see some visuals behind this, or actually see a real case study where I used a tour as the case study, you can sign up for the Insider Circle and search for the local event promo strategy there. We also meet once a week for live coaching calls, and I release, for the most part, monthly training modules. Again, you can learn more about the Insider Circle if you go to musicmarketingmanifesto.com and click on products and services in the nav bar. You can also find out more about my flagship program, Music Marketing Manifesto. It's currently in its 5th edition, and my website builder platform for musicians that will help you put together these kinds of funnels to market your music or your events in a matter of minutes. And that's called TunePipe, and you can find a link for that there as well. Thank you for listening. Again, expect a lot more content from me coming soon. I have some courses planned, some new products, some new training modules, a lot more new podcasts, blog posts, videos, and the rest of it. And if you need any assistance, I can always be reached at john@musicmarketingmanifesto.com. All right, thank you for listening. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Music Marketing Manifesto podcast. If you'd like to learn more about how you can market your music using the direct-to-fan strategies discussed on this show, then head on over to musicmarketingmanifesto.com and sign up for your free copy of the Music Marketing Blueprint. Once again, that's musicmarketingmanifesto.com.